Name. No. Name. No. Name. No. Name. No.
Bring it on over to ADL stream. Oh, wait, bring audio in and then over to live stream and focus you and good to oh no I'm not. Pop out. Click Alan. Now I'm good to go. All right, man. Take it away.
All right, hello and welcome. Today we're going to be going over the history of laser interferometry experiments that may or may not prove the globe and may or may not prove the ether. As we're all told a certain narrative about how these experiments went down and all that, and how the current interferometry experiments work nowadays. And we're going to go over the history of all that, and it's going to be completely counter to the narrative that we've all been told. So this is all your laser interferometry now belongs to us. Allow this to serve as a guide through the history of experimental evidence that proves the Earth does not move and there is the existence of an ether. So we got some interferometry devices here. This one is the Michelson-Morley device, big concrete slab on some mercury, or suspended on a pool of mercury. 4 mirrors here, or 3 mirrors, and the source emitter, or whatever, the laser beam, anyway, splits the laser beam, hits the prism, gets split, hits the mirrors and recombines. And if the speed of light is the same as if they assumed, then there should not be an interference pattern. And that's basically how all the devices work. So I'll go through the like the prerequisite information to kind of tell like the history of what the devices actually do and all that stuff. So the measurable difference between heliocentrism and geocentrism. This is 1887, Michelson-Morley. They were testing to see if the Earth was in motion and if there was an ether. Their hypothesis was that there was a stationary ether and the Earth was moving towards it. So what they did is they took their Michelson-Morley device, had it aligned in such a way that the one of the beams was facing north with the assumed motion of the sun in that direction, and the other one was perpendicular to that which would have been facing, towards the ether, which would have been dragging against it, right? So when they did that experiment, they got they predicted that they were going to get a fringe shift pattern that was going to correspond to a motion of 30 kilometers a second. They were trying to measure the translational motion of the Earth, and they got a fringe shift pattern that was consistent with 8 kilometers a second. So what they did was, to save heliocentrism, the motion of the Earth, they said that the device was an error and it was a null result, and they just disregard the 8 kilometers a second. So we're going to go ahead and recover that 8 kilometers a second. We'll take it since they don't want it. And as we move on, we'll see the significance of the 8 kilometers a second. And the reason why they abandoned it so quickly was because if they didn't have their 8 kilometers a second, then they don't have no proof that the Earth is facing the sun in the way that heliocentrism describes. See here. Okay, so we'll get into a little bit of how they interpret these laser interferometry experiments through the lens of special relativity, making assumptions about the propagation of light and all that. So special relativity is the framework through which laser interferometry is interpreted. Special relativity's postulates. The first postulate, the principle of relativity, is that all inertial frames are equally valid. So this implies that the speed of light should be the same in all reference frames. It shouldn't change. And let's see, what was the other one? The second postulate is the constancy of the speed of light. So they set a finite speed of light. It's 300,000 kilometers a second. So this is how they're interpreting this, right? So when they split the beams and all this, the hypothesis was that the light would drag against the ether and it would be slower and produce a fringe shift pattern. So they did get a fringe shift pattern, but they didn't get one big enough to correspond to the motion that is required for heliocentrism to be true, and that's why they threw it out. Let's see. Okay, so just a little bit more on the interferometer. So this is like a topographical view of a Michelson-Morley style device. You got your laser here, you got your prism, 2 mirrors. The laser beam hits the prism, gets split in both directions, and then when it's recombined here at the detector, that's where they're measuring their fringe shift patterns. So to give an analogy on the wave patterns and what a fringe shift pattern is and all that, we have some quotes here from LIGO, and these people have the big laser interferometer. So this is kind of their little description of it. So anyone who has thrown stones into a flat, glassy pond or pool and watched what happens knows about interference. When the stone hits the water, it generates a concentric wave that moves away from the source. 2 or more of these concentric waves intersect, or when 2 or more of these waves intersect, they interfere with each other. This interference can result in a larger wave, a smaller wave, or no wave at all. The visible pattern occurring in where the waves intersects is the interference pattern. So here, somebody threw a stone in here, threw a stone in here. You can see where the ripples are intersecting, right? So you'll get either a constructive interference pattern where the waves combine and they make a bigger wave, or you'll get a destructive interference pattern where the waves combine and they cancel each other out. Everything makes sense so far for the interferometry?
For me, it does.
All right, take your silence as consent. Let's see, so that was... Okay, yeah, so this is just another representation of that, the constructive interference pattern. So when the waves combine, it gets bigger. When they cancel out, that's the destructive. And you can see that noted here. So when these waves, I think it was, the peaks, when the peaks are not in alignment, but when they intersect, that's when you get to cancel out. So that's what the black line is as these 2 waves are moving together. That's what that represents. For that. And then we got different types of fringe patterns here. So and they do different things. So we'll just kind of give you an overview of the different usefulness of these fringe patterns. So interference, fringe patterns can provide valuable information about the underlying conditions that cause them. By analyzing the thickness, clarity, and the pattern of the fringes, researchers can extrapolate about the factors that influence the appearance of the pattern. For example, a fringe shift pattern may be formed, or you can reveal the following information. So interference fringes occur when two or more coherent waves, such as light, interact with each other. These fringes can reveal information about the relative phase difference in the intensity distribution of the phasing waves. Changes in the fringe pattern indicate variations in its wavelength, so refractive index or wavelength waves. So when you can use this so in this example, right, they shoot a light on this, right, and you see this interference pattern. What this is doing, this particular pattern, is how they can measure the refractive index of something, and that's kind of noted. I think these are also similar to that pattern. I think that's what that is. So you can see how the light interacts with stuff when it goes through it. So Newton rings are circular interference pattern observed in a plano-convex lens, which is placed on top of a flat glass surface. These rings can provide insights into the flatness or thickness of a surface. So yeah, you can measure how flat something is and how thick it is, the thickness of air gaps between the lens and the glass, and the refractive index of the medium. Mori fringes are patterns that arise two regular grids. These can provide information about the relative displacement, rotation, or scaling patterns. And these are used in various fields, including meteorology and image processing and all that stuff. I forget which one those were. Actually, I think they're in order. So the Haginger's fringes are observed when the polarized light passes through a fringe crystal, resulting in interference pattern. The fringe provides information about the orientation and the optics, or the optical properties of the crystal, as well as the changes in the polarization state of light as it passes through it. Damn, keep doing that. All right, white light fringes. White light fringes occur when a broadband light source is used in interferometry experiments. The fringe exhibits different colors to the dispersion of light, providing information about the wavelength and dependency, or about the wavelength dependence of the interferometer setup and the potential variations of the refractive index. So a lot of information can be extracted about this, and one of the things you can do also is measure motion with it. Okay, let's see. So that was the prerequisites for that. So we're going to move on to, kind of already covered the Dayton Miller stuff. That they threw those out and said that it was instrumental air. So we're going to take a look at, in this presentation for this particular part, we're going to look at the Dayton Miller, who picked up the Michelson-Morley style laser interferometry experiments shortly after what's his name, Michelson-Morley, right? So we recall back, Michelson-Morley was thrown out because they said it was just instrumental air. They just chalked it up to nothing. So they actually have no rotation for the revolution. I mean, they have no measurement for the revolution of Earth around the sun, which is, which would be a huge proof for heliocentrism. And anything less than that, they had to throw out for so that they could imply it. So the way that they were able to save it was they did a coordinate system transformation, and they applied Lorentz contraction to the apparatus, and they said that the apparatus physically shrank because it was interacting with the ether, and it physically shrank the apparatus by the exact amount that would produce a fringe shift pattern that would make it seem like they weren't moving. So the universe is just playing tricks on them. Luckily, Lorentz was able to figure this out. And then later Einstein came along and said, well, actually, you can just remove the ether component and just say that space-time itself is contracting the apparatus, which we all know is somehow even worse than what Lorentz did, because, I don't think it was very scientific for what he did either, because he basically just reverse engineered their results and said that that the contraction was the exact amount needed to save heliocentrism. So that's not a cool explanation either, even though his explanation was in favor of the ether. But anyway, we'll move on to Dayton Miller now, who picked up the interferometry. He did his experiments, a majority of them in the 1920s, in between there. And then he did a big summary of his work in the 30s. So basically between 1902 and 1933, he did five. I'll just read from the thing. Dayton Miller conducted the most extensive experimentation using laser interferometry in the 1900s, conducting a total of 5,200,000 measurements. He was able to determine the direct cause and effect relationship with the speed of light and in the ether, the movement of the sun the movement of the sun on its axial tilt, and the and how that corresponds with the cosmic microwave background. The fringe shift patterns reach their maximum and minimum dimensions in accordance with the equinoxes. This is directly relating a translation of motion from the sky to the earth. The subsequent Michelson-Morley experiments in modern times that are trending towards zero only further prove Miller's hypothesis. As you get closer to the surface of the earth, less motion is translated than at altitude. He also made consideration for the environment of the apparatus, i.e., how it was enclosed, the materials that enclosed it, like the housing that he used for all that, the shielding that he used for the lasers and all that, the pipes, everything, all the materials. For this reason, Miller's later work consisted of taking measurements at altitude, and this allowed him to make consistent measurements that fluctuate with an ether speed. So what he found was that the reason that Michelson-Morley didn't get such a good reading or whatever was that because it was underground and, you know, in a basement basically and all this shit. And he found that he could get really consistent and accurate readings by doing it at altitude. And basically the way that he had his interferometer set up, it was like, it was very like open to the elements, kind of very free flowing air and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, when they do modern experiments, right, what they do now is they change the length of the arms of the apparatus. They change the location of the sensor. They put it in a fucking basement. They put it in the lowest part of the lowest spot they can find. And then they do the interferometry experiment. And they're like, oh my God, it's getting less than even what Michelson-Morley got. And like they attribute this to that their instruments are getting more accurate and they're not producing this air reading, using air quotes. But what's actually really happening is that they're isolating themselves in such a way and doing the experiment in such a way that it won't accurately detect the motion. And while Miller was alive, nobody could refute him on this in his experiments. Every time somebody would come at him, he would just do more experiments, control for more variables, and just super over the top. I mean, 5,200,000. It's the most extensive body of work done in laser interferometry that produces an outcome that matches the sidereal rotation of the sky, like to the fucking equinoxes, boys. Like it's not even close to an air measurement or anything like that. Like it corresponds to the sky. So just keep that in mind. So Miller says a very striking consistency of the principal characteristics for azimuth and magnitude as they were related to a common cause. The observed effect is dependent upon the sidereal time and is independent of the diurnal and seasonal change temperatures or terrestrial causes, and is a cosmical phenomenon. So what he's saying there is that like temperature changes throughout the season, wind, rain, heat, humidity, all that shit. He, accounted for all that kind of stuff. He would put like direct heating on the device. He would change different types of heat used. Like he literally accounted for everything and found that the fluctuations only happen in the equinox. So when the sun is, beginning to move closer to us, and it's going to be moving slower. When it moves further away, it has to move faster to maintain that 15 degrees per hour. This speed fluctuation is what Miller measured, right? He measured the sun moving, basically, like, following the ether vortex, right? If there's an ether vortex at the North Pole and extending outwards, right? If you're in the north, if the sun's in the northern hemisphere, right, it's going to be traveling slower, but still around that vortex up to keep that 15 degrees. As it moves further away, it still has to keep that 15 degrees. It's moving faster. Miller measured that to the day. As the universe completes its yearly circuit around us on the 23-degree axial tilt, the CMB, that corresponds to the movement of the sun as it travels along its axis between the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer to produce our seasons. All right. Any questions thus far, boys?
Yep, I got one.
Send it.
More like a general observation. But it's just to like keep everyone up to speed. The whole purpose of these interferometry experiments, beginning with Michelson Morley and going on, and what Dayton Miller probably continued on, is what they were looking for. The biggest rotation, the movement that they meant to measure, was not, in fact, the sidereal rotation. It was the giant motion of the Earth around the sun, somewhat like 66,000 miles an hour. Should have been easy to detect with the sensitivity of these instruments, and no one has ever detected anything close to resembling that, right? What they did
Yeah, not
detect.
even.
Go ahead, dude.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, not even close. So the original Michelson-Morley device was sensitive enough to detect 2 miles a second,
Right.
and they were looking for 30, so they were well in their range tolerance. And then Dayton Miller came along doing exactly analogous experiments in terms of apparatus length, sensor, and all that. The only thing he was changing really was he put it at altitude and he exposed it a little more to the elements, so to speak. Other than that, they're literally identical experiments, and he just kept reproducing this vast body of work that consistently showed a fluctuation with the corresponding with the equinoxes. So when the sun is, beginning its change, right?
So what they did measure and what he measured spectacularly with great degree of specificity is in fact the sidereal rotation, right? So go over the first part where they measure it both ways, because that's confounding to me. But they don't get what they want
Uh,
going one way, so they add them together and measure it going the other way and call it like sphericity.
oh, are you talking about the Sagnac device?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't going to do Sagnac tonight
Oh, my
because I
bad.
still have more stuff. But no, we definitely can.
It's the same sort
Um,
of motion that they're trying to measure with a
yeah.
different
Oh,
device,
yeah.
though, right? So,
Yeah. So it's exactly the same. So like we'll actually remind me to come back to that. We'll
all
just come
right.
back to it. Let me finish up Miller, and we'll fucking slam dunk the Sagnac shit. So okay, so responses to Dayton Miller's work, right? So they had to come in and assassinate this guy's work after he died, because while he was alive, no one could refute him. Someone would be like, "Oh, but what about temperature?" And he would be like, "Oh, word, temperature. Here's a million interferometry experiments where I control for every temperature variation you can ever possibly imagine," and they just would, go home and be quiet or whatever. Miller's former research assistant, Shankland, was hired. I think his name is Robert Shankland. I call him Skankland. So Skankland comes in and just undermines his work basically with a broad stroke hand wave dismissal, saying that Miller didn't account for temperature variations. There was a temperature gradient differential, and that's what caused it. And if you look through Miller's body of work, he explicitly accounted for these variables. And while he was alive, no one would have said such ridiculous shit to him. Actually, I think someone did say some shit like that to him. Einstein, I think it was, said it, and then it was published in a paper in Pennsylvania, where he was like, "Yeah, this dude thinks I didn't account for temperature. Like, he's literally retarded." I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, while he was alive, nobody could say this kind of ridiculous shit to him. So anyway, even in Skankland's work, at the end of his papers, he says, "I don't even have enough temperature gradient information to make the assumption, but it's true. Just go ahead and believe me." So that right there tells you all you need to know about that guy. And then after that, his career was kind of catapulted. He got like exclusive interviews with Einstein and some other stuff. He was elevated after his character assassination of this work. Plus, I'll just read off a little bit of the history here. Shankland's bias. Shankland, a former student of Miller, later became a prominent a proponent of Einstein's relativity theory. He built his career on publications that misrepresented the Michelson-Morley experiment as solid evidence against the existence of ether. So, quick sidebar: every paper that I read, like almost all of them, they all are baffled by the Michelson-Morley's null result. Nobody realizes that this, is valid and stuff. Oh, can you hear me okay now? All right, cool. Yeah, so this is the guy that's responsible for everyone not realizing, that Michelson Morley did make a measurement, just wasn't the one that they predicted. So the implication, but by the way, of the Michelson Morley thing, so when they're measuring the ether, the speed of the ether, it's relative to a stationary Earth, right? So like they can't. That's why they can't have this. That's why it's unquestionable, unfathomable, no result. Can't look into it. You know, And this is why they had to have this guy do this. So anyway, we'll continue on now. He built his career on publications that misrepresent the Michelson-Morley device as solid evidence against the ether. This bias raised questions about the objectivity of the work of his of Miller's work. So he just undermined it all. I think I wrote that wrong. But anyway, he just undermined Miller's work. Through that, the misrepresentation of the experiments, Shanklin falsely claimed that the trials of the Michelson-Morley experiments, except those carried out by Miller, yielded no results. This misrepresentation ignores the slightly positive result obtained by other interferometry experiments, suggesting a deliberate bias against Miller's findings. So they'll do, they have done subsequent Michelson-Morley type experiments, like I said, but they do tend towards, zero, but it's because they're not even doing them correctly. But even when they fuck it up on purpose, it still picks up something, right? But they're just attributing that to instrument error because they've been lied to by your boy Shanklin here. So the lack of comprehensive evaluation, Shanklin's paper gave the impression of a comprehensive review of Miller's interferometry observations, but the scope was truly limited. The team focused on researching random errors or statistical fluctuations in Miller's data, looking for a selected data set that demonstrates the temperature artifacts that they were looking for. This limited approach undermines their credibility of their critique. So they were also they were looking at the way that he was mathematically analyzing his work and trying to account for errors in that way, and they were trying to derive temperature fluctuation errors without even having temperature information, which is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. So they were just like hands down trying to just attack it instead of analyze it. You know what I mean? So the statistical analysis was done by a Shanklin student. Yeah, he didn't even put his own name on it. That's funny. Forgot about that. They give him a little side note. So yeah, they basically got together and undermined his entire work and made sure that nobody would ever bring this up again as proof of anything. 5,200,000 experiments. When people were like, where's your repeatable, reproducible experiment? I don't know. Dayton Miller did it 5,200,000 times. And then Michelson-Morley did it a couple times. So it's like, what, 5,200,004 or 5, right? So we got a couple interferometry experiments under our belt. So the Dayton Miller conclusion: Dayton Miller's work on the ether drift, which was conducted with precision and diligence, has been disregarded and omitted from the history of science. Despite Miller's response to his critics and his consistent demonstration of an ether drift, he was viewed as a threat by Einstein and his followers who sought to explain Miller's work away. The Shanklin team, in their attempt to discredit Miller, selectively analyzed his data and failed to systematically evaluate his most important experiments. While the Shanklin conclusions were negative, they inadvertently confirmed Miller's claim of the periodic effect of the interferometer data, which is not shown to be due to mechanical errors or temperature fluctuations. The Shanklin team focused on the temperature artifacts, but did not thoroughly analyze Miller's data to Miller's crucial Mount Wilson data. So this is where I was talking about where he went to altitude and had his device exposed a little bit and all that. Which is where he got his best and most accurate readings that directly correspond with the motion of the sky. So the larger issue of the periodic effects in the data table and their potential impact on the temperature was not adequately addressed by the Shanklin team. A team possibly influenced by Einstein cherry-picked the data to support their predetermined conclusion that Miller was wrong rather than following the scientific method. Independent studies of Miller's work and his findings or support his findings and the existence of an ether-like force. So before we get into some independent reviews, we'll look at, actually, this is from an independent review of Dayton. So this is from Maurice Elias, who is a French physicist and economist who won a Nobel Prize for something in economics. But anyway, he's a physicist as well. And he did his own analysis of Miller's data, and we're just going to read a little bit of the conclusion here. These are, this is the fringe shift pattern when plotted against, the diurnal seasonal time. It just doesn't make any sense. No causation, no correlation. Put it against sidereal time, so the sky clock, and all of a sudden it reaches a peak at the equinox, dips down, and that's what we're going to read over here. So the periodicity of the global ether drift. Planar ether drift, boys. Relax. From Dayton Miller, Mountain Wilson's experiments, 1925 to 1926, the top graph above plots data from 4 separate months or epochs measured at different times of the year and organized by sidereal time, showing the definite periodic curve. The heavy line is the mean of all 4 epochs. The bottom of the graph plots it against organized by civil time coordinates here, which the data plotted data spreads out along the graph without apparent periodicity. This demonstrates that the detected axis and Shane, help me out. What word is this? I can't say it, bro. Periodicity. Jesus. Okay. So, and the periodicity of the ether drift is the same for different times of years, but can only be seen when the data is viewed through a cosmological sidereal coordinate system from Miller, 1928, page 326. These data curves are organized along azimuths. Azimuthal means that later were recomputed by Miller's publication as given in figure 10. So there we go. All the peaks and dips correspond with the equinoxes. The average velocity and azimuth of the global ether drift, planar ether drift, from Dayton Miller, Mount Wilson ether drift experiment, 1925, 1926. Top graph. Average
Wait.
variations.
They
Yes,
call
sir.
it ether drift. That's their term.
This is Maurice Elias's analysis, and he was an ether lad.
So, but like people who are proponents will readily call it ether drift, as might as well call it like the sidereal speed of the sky or the sun storm speed, whatever you want to call it, the magnetic flux ether drift, dude. That's awesome. That's an awesome name.
Yeah, it's pretty tight. So the average variations of the observed magnitude of the ether drift for all 4 epochs of measurement. Maximum velocity occurs at 5 hours sidereal time and minimum velocity at about 17 hours sidereal time. While Miller's 1933 paper assumed the Earth was pushing through an ether moving toward Dorado, near the southern pole of the plane of the ecliptic, and the movement of the direction of the ether past the interferometer was exactly opposite to this, towards Draco, near the North Pole plane of the ecliptic, 18 hours right ascension, declination of plus 68 degrees. It is important from this standpoint of his working theory to clarify the concept of the net motion of Earth versus the direction of the ether drift. However, if the ether drift itself is in motion acting on a cosmic prime mover, the direction of the ether drift and its net motion of Earth would be identical, though at different velocities. Bottom graph averages variations of in observed azimuth readings according to sidereal time. This graph uses the average data curve from figure 11, top graph, published by Miller, 1928, page 363, but at the time was given a different baseline average. The same graph is presented here for the first time using Miller's revised seasonal averages as published in 1933, page 235, which helped define the axis of the ether drift. Amazingly, the independent averages of the 4 epochs provided by Miller, February equals minus 10 degrees west of north, April equals plus 40 degrees east, August equals plus 10 degrees east, September equals plus 55 degrees east. Together, they yielded a mean displacement of 23.75 degrees east of north. Figure 13. This is close to Earth's axial tilt of 23.5 degrees. It can hardly be more than coincidental. The more discussion in Demio 2002, adapted from Miller. So what he just read out there is basically the way Miller modeled out this ether fluctuation, is he was equating it, to the Earth's axial tilt, right? So for the seasons and stuff. But where was the shit? I actually don't have it. 1 second. Oh, no, I do. Never mind. So this is what your boy measured right here. I'm going to play this out. I'm just going to watch this. So we got your sun here moving along its ecliptic.
Just know that we can't hear the sound, right? I know there's probably music playing.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
You guys just need the visual. You don't deserve the music.
Although it is badass music.
Yeah, so let's skip ahead here. So you see the sun, is moving to the, further out in the south. Like, this is it, boys. This motion right here.
So, dude, it would make sense if you measured the ether drift maximum speeds at solstice, and then let me make a further prediction based on my flat Earth knowledge that the equinox would be the mean speed. If you were to judge it like that, it would speed up and slow down with the sun's path. Wouldn't that make sense?
Oh my God, are you making flat Earth predictions, dude? Are we about to make another Brian Leakey video, my dude? Yeah, dude. So this is it, boys. This is what your boy Dayton Miller measured. All right. So that's all we got for Dayton Miller. Now, what was I going to do for Staniak? What were we talking about?
I had specifically brought up how when they measure the unanticipated wrong speed in one direction, they make up for it by measuring it in the other direction and then adding them together. And
Okay, so
because that's what they were trying to measure, is the same speed, the same motion.
Yeah, let me see if I already included that.
Wow, you have a lot more slides, dude.
It's not the proper stuff isn't added yet. Damn, I didn't add it. How is that possible? Wow. Okay. Well, I don't have it. I don't have the shit prepared, and it really requires visuals, man. We'll have to do a follow up because like no, it's a good point, but hold on one second. I
have another easier question if you want to jump to that.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I'm gonna try and pull up a video of it, and then I can just show it from that.
Dude, how many experiments did Dayton Miller perform?
5,200,000. Give or take one or two, right?
That's a real fucking number.
Yeah,
you weren't just being like superfluous to say like, oh, 5 million. He did millions. He did literally 5 million experiments.
No,
wait, what is that like? Counting like every line item in one experiment as its own experiment or something?
I think so, because he had it set up where it would do like 8 different ones at once, so it wasn't like he was doing them one at a time or whatever.
All right.
But yeah, he totals out to 5,200,000 just from him. He has this extensive body of work. Yeah, dude, he was. I mean, like, your boy came correct, right? Like, every time somebody was talking that shit about how his measurements were dog shit, he would just literally account for every variable, do 1 million experiments, bang them out and control as many variables as possible, and then derive everything on that. And what he showed was that that most temperature flux shit didn't affect it at all. Like, he would put direct heat on it and all that, nothing. So when Shanklin comes in and he's like an internet troll, he's like, the temperature gradient debunks you or whatever. It's just like, it's like literal child shit. So
it's like Glober Discord level stuff. Only people on Discord.
Yeah, it's like Reddit. It's like Reddit tier argument, and it's so sad to see all these academic papers now, and people are just like, yeah, Nicholson Morley was a bust, boys. And then some people that know about Dayton Miller will talk about it, but they'll be like, but that was a bust too. And it's like literally all based on one dude who just typed temperature differential, and everyone was like, all right, good, we're good to go, boys.
Pick it up, moving on. We'll never talk about this again. Yeah, that sounds
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm trying to pull this up here.
Now it should be starting to sink in how fucking ironically stupid Thanks Bob has been as like a giant diversion and obfuscation of what in reality is like some of the most solid flat Earth proof that exists.
Okay, here we go. Change my thing. Oops, it's not it. PDF reader, show desktop. All right, you guys see this video?
Yep.
All right, so this is laser interferometry. You know how we've all had to deal with the Thanks Bob and stuff because he got a laser interferometer, and they say that he measured the rotation of the Earth and stuff. So we're going to examine how that actually works real quick. So when you have a ring laser gyro, this is one that this guy constructed himself. So the device has to be, where's the pictures at? The device literally has to be axially tilted at the fucking sky, boys, relative to your latitude. So if you're at, say you're 40 degrees latitude, or 45 degrees latitude, you have to tilt your device 45 degrees to Polaris to be in alignment with it to get the reading. So what they get in the 45 parallel, right, northern hemisphere, the reading that they get is like 7.5 degrees per hour, right? So what they do to get that to 15 degrees, they flip the device, take the measurement again, and just add it and say that that's the full effect of the rotation, right? Now, in my research, I've only come across experiments done at the actually I have it on Google Earth. I'll pull it up. So this latitude and tilt is really important because we don't have information on how they handle this in the south, and I'll explain why that's relevant after I show you what we have available in the north. So we have this place at latitude, at 43 latitude on the glob. This is a laser interferometer that is used, this laboratory here is used to measure the rotation of the Earth with their device. They have a similar setup to this, but it looks obviously way more professional. But it's, tilted on its axis at 45 degrees to be in alignment with Polaris. And this one over here is another one, and it's also, this one's at 49. So they're all within this really close approximate range where if you take a double measurement, it's going to more or less be 15 degrees per hour. And then the guy from this video lives in somewhere in Canada. So he's somewhere in like the 40 to 45. He's like in between there. So again, we have these claims where they take this measurement, they do this double reading, and they call it Earth rotation. So on the globe, let me just zoom in here. 1 second. All right, so on the globe, as you get to the equator, your readings are going to be less and less, right? But then as you start coming back down, it's going to be symmetrical, right? So when you get to the 45th down here, you're going to have the same axial tilt, same 7.5 degree reading, same situation, right? Well, I couldn't find anything outside of the 45th, especially when it was like from a laboratory, right? And then some random guy on YouTube that just happened to be at 45. And then Bob also did his experiment in Colorado. He was around the 39th, like between like the 39th and like the 43rd parallel. So he was actually within like the same range too here. So the modern inertial navigation systems, what they do is they have their initial gyroscope mounted fixed, right? And then they have another gyroscope mounted for each XYZ axis. So one underneath it, one to the side, one above it. And it takes these readings without having to be reorientated or anything like that. And it does these corrections. So if what's happening here is on a stationary topographical plane with an ether vortex above us, when you're closer to it, you're going to get that stronger reading, right? So up here, you would get a solid 15 degree per hour without doing any crazy correctional shit, right? And then, keep in mind, it's illegal to travel up here, right? So, or actually, I think it was closer to this spot. But anyway, so as you get further away from that, you're going to have to maintain that 15 degree per hour. You could get people to do a double measurement and then add it together, average it out. Oh my God, 15 degrees per hour. But it would only work around, that latitude for the doubling. And then it's going to drop off towards, as you get to the equator, then it's not going to detect anything here. And then as you pass the equator, if it's detecting Earth rotation, right? And then as you come back around, it's going to be the same, but inverse, right? And if it doesn't do that, if it just keeps getting smaller, so if it's 15 degrees here, 7 degrees here, like 3 degrees here, if it doesn't come back up and it just goes like 2 degrees, 1 degree, half a degree, that kind of shit, then it's direct evidence that, there's an ether vortex, right? Because that the rotation should be symmetrical. Now, these devices are classified when you can't like analyze them. If there's any problems with them, you have to take them to their manufacturer, the inertial guidance systems, right? And the reason for this is because they have an onboard computer system on them, which uses this thing called the Kalman data set. The Kalman data set is itself pretty much classified. Go ahead.
No, I just laughing. It's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah. So the Kelvin data set is classified, and what it's doing, right? What it says it's doing in the manuals is that it's calibrating and checking, or when the device is in calibration mode, right? So to even use an inertial navigation system, let's back up for a second. The best way to use it would be you're in a ship and you're ported, you're stationary for at least 72 hours. Your device is turning on and off. It's taking its calibration measurements and all that, and then it compares its measurements over the 72-hour period against the Kalman data set, which is classified, and and then that's where it gets all its corrections and statistical derivations of what it needs to correct for and account for, and make sure the device itself is properly calibrated against what they already have for their for how much ether drift or whatever they should be getting at the different latitudes, right? So
it's like literally classified. Like, is the data set is like encrypted on these devices?
You're not allowed to open it or do any maintenance on it. If there's any problem with it, you have to take it back to the manufacturer.
Totally not suspicious to anyone, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's really crazy.
Yeah, you cannot open them up. I don't have a direct classification thing. I heard it was classified from Bob saying that, so I don't actually have a citation for that.
Well, it's
myself, but I mean,
not the best source, but at the same time, it hurts his case. So, like, I don't. Why would
at the same time, it's like the fact that you can't do open analysis of it and like we can't review it. I mean, it kind of tells you all you need to know, right?
Wait, Penguin, he's talking about Bob from Globebusters, not Bob the Science Guy that you've been listening to all day.
Oh, I was thinking of Bob the Science Guy.
I could tell by that reaction that you didn't get it. Okay.
Gotcha.
We're good.
Yeah, so let's see here. The calibration, the Kalman data set, the maintenance. So my thing is that if you're on a glob and everything's locally flat, the way that they say, the axis of rotation is going straight through the fucking glob. So if you're locally flat, you wouldn't need to horizontally correct your device to be aligned with the fucking sky, because what they're doing, they're aligning it with Polaris, and they're changing the orientation to be in alignment with it too, right? Like not just directionally, turning it, but like also flipping the z-axis to be in alignment with it. So they're literally measuring the fucking sky, boys, hands down. Like that's it. They have to tilt it to the sky to get their rotational values. So like, thanks Bob, nothing, dog. It's literally thank the fucking sky.
Wait, so Einstein's quote applies directly to it. His thing about how no terrestrial experiment, like, it's like exactly like, because you're just looking at the sky. It's like that's what Einstein was smart enough to know. These idiots, like, only selectively listen to him.
I think.
All right, I don't like saying idiot. I don't like calling people idiots, but
yeah,
it's just like they have selective hearing. Like Einstein said this for a reason, because he knew. Well, the sky doesn't tell you jack.
Yeah. And then further, like I have to shit really bad, so I'm gonna wrap this up really quick, boys. Let's see here. Okay, so wrapping up the Sagnac effect, right? So this Sagnac effect is more than just taking an enclosed device and spinning it around and saying that its independent rotation allows it to measure against itself, or an absolute background of quasar stars and shit like that. The Sagnac effect is also shown to be linear. So in the Michelson-Morley experiment, where they were like, hey, length contraction, it can't be done, right? Or whatever. A guy named Ruyong Wang linearized the Sagnac effect, which I have the papers for, it's just not in the presentation, which directly shows that that the Sagnac effect applies in inertial reference frames as well as non-inertial reference frames, because the way they try and get out of it is they say that special relativity doesn't apply to non-inertial reference frames, and the Sagnac device is a non-inertial reference frame. And then once they realize that they had to further co-opt it, they come up with different explanations to try and co-opt the results, basically showing a fringe shift pattern, a preferred direction in the speed of light, so to speak, not even so to speak, directly. And what they'll do is they'll invoke like another reference frame. They'll say if you're an observer at the North Pole and there's some other observers, that are away from you, and you spin the Signac device, the observer at the North Pole won't see a fringe shift pattern. Therefore, special relativity is preserved. Like, they come up with all kinds of crazy shit, boys. There's a paper written or cited by Wang as well, where he cites like over a dozen explanations where they've tried to derive the Sagnac effect in terms of relativistic effects, even though the relativity, has very strict postulates about the speed of light and reference frames. And the Sagnac effect absolutely body bags all of them. If you want to catch up on the GPS stuff last night in tandem with this interferometry stuff, you can see how the Sagnac effect relates and is accounted for in GPS. So basically, there is a preferred direction to the propagation of this for light, and that is west to east. When light is traveling west to east, it is slightly faster than light going east to west, and that is that hands down can happen in special relativity if everything is to be on the up and up with Einstein, if it were all to be true. So what they've done is they've measured the ether. They're using ether technology. They're accounting for ether effects in a preferred direction, aka an absolute reference frame, preferred reference frame, right? Which invalidates the first postulate of special relativity that all reference frames are equally valid. They're not. There's a preferred one, and this is shown in the math used in GPSs.
That's awesome.
So with the range measurement equation in a specific coordinate system to go along with that measurement. Shane, what's the name of that coordinate system that's to be used with the range measurement equation for GPS?
Is that the Earth-centered Earth fix, or is it the Earth-centered reference frame?
The Earth-centered inertial frame.
There
So the ECI, and what that is a stationary, non-rotating Earth. But the way that they describe it actually, and it's so good for us too, because I'm glad that they went with this one. I'm glad that this one is the one that is the magic one, because the Earth-centered, Earth-fixed one still implies rotation, but in a different way that would not be helpful to our case. So the ECI frame, they account that perspective as being at the center of the globe, where you're not experiencing any of the globe rotation or the globe's motion through space. But the surface of the Earth is rotating relative to you, right? So the analogous translation of that would just be an equidistant azimuthal map. A lat at the center would experience no ether vortexual motion, and as you move away from it, even a stationary ground station, on a fixed Earth would experience the preferred propagation effects due to the east-west preferred propagation increasing the speed. So it's actually super analogous to a flat Earth. You literally just have to look at it slightly differently. So really good, really positive for us. There's hands down a preferred directional speed of light. I'm going to have more of that stuff in the full presentation. This was kind of just a get the ground rolling kind of thing and get it out there. But that's all I got for now. So does anyone have any questions or anything before I wrap this up, or shit my pants live? We'll see which one happens first.
No questions here, but thanks, man. That was great. I only caught the second half, but it was awesome.
Yeah, awesome, dude. All right, no questions. All right, well, I'm immediately gonna go shit. Shane, roll us out, brother.
Nice. Well, let's see. No one has any other comments?
Yeah, that presentation was shit.
Nice. Good one.
Nice.
Thanks. Took me at least 2 seconds.
Dude, honestly, this is so eye-opening for me. Like, because, dude, thank God for Alan to do this research that I'm too lazy to do, so that it can parse it out to digestible chunks that people like us can take it and move it and add to it and use it in our daily combatants with these global sellouts, dude.
Well, this is why I say that this is like a team. It's a team sport, right? So some people I get the impression that Alan doesn't really want to just talk with globetards all day, every day, and he prefers to just research stuff and read through PDFs. And that's fine. That's cool. That's like, we need people who are prepared to do that, because I'm much more a combative, kind of argumentative type of person. I could probably sit down and read these articles and understand them, but I can't really be bothered. And and I feel like that we need to have like an intellectual backbone. It's like a company, right? You've got a sales division and you've got a research and development division, right? And you got a marketing division, whatever. And Alan's like part of the R&D, and that's just how companies work, right?
Yeah,
Like
dude,
it.
I feel it. Everyone plays to their strengths for sure, and we work better as a cohesive unit. I mean, like, yeah, you said Alan doesn't like yelling at Globetrotters all day. Definitely not, dude, right? And I'm definitely falling into that category more and more now. I started out trying to debate him, and then, after endless hours banging your head against the wall, trying to convince the wall that two planes took down three towers, you kind of realize, oh, maybe this effort is in vain. I should probably better invest my time and energy elsewhere. And then you start,
Well, or just
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but or just have like the proper expectations for that. Like, all right, I'm not trying to convince these people, but it's not about these people. It's just about like being a patient debater and showing that these people use like slimy tactics in order to try and make their points.
Yeah, and that's an evolution in and of itself, right? Know your adversary, learn like the utter confidence with which they will say the most befuddling, stupid, contradictory things is kind of staggering. And then when you kind of get good
And
with
how far they'll
that,
go to try and insult you to like get at your emotions. It's like such a big part of their game.
how hard they try to trigger you in any circumstance so that the fight becomes emotional and not about, yeah, absolutely, that's a tactic. And then that in and of itself makes you raise both red flags and two eyebrows, right? Like, what? Why would
Yeah,
you need to
yeah. So
do that?
that's the point. Yeah, is like yeah, it sucks to be the first on the other side of it, but those random bystanders that see it or hear are like, wait, what's going on here? Like, why can't these people be honest?
Yep. But stuff like this presentation, because now they had for like years propagated the community with slogans like "Thanks, Bob," "Chuckle, chuckle," even though 9 times out of 10 the person chuckling doesn't have any idea what laser interferometry is, what the Sagnac effect is, what the preferred speed is, the direction of speed of light is, and how that affects the whole paradigm. They have no idea about any of these things. And by becoming more aware of these things ourselves, we can maybe say politely point out the inconsistencies in their logic when they do stupid things like say thanks, Bob.
Well, have you guys ever heard this? One of the most retarded statements I've ever heard in my life is the phrase "absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence."
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah, I've heard Negator say that.
Like, that's like the most. That's actually logically wrong. But even if you just say, okay, I'll accept that on a philosophical level. Well, if you don't have any evidence for a position, why are you arguing it? That doesn't even make sense.
It is the most nonsensical. Like the more I think about it, the more I'm just laughing. Yeah, it's basically just like saying everything is something.
Yeah, and well, and I would argue that absence of evidence is evidence of absence, because I mean, evidence isn't all-encompassing proof, right? Or is it? I don't know. I mean, they're going to change the definition now, but surely the fact that you can't find evidence for something is evidence that it might not be true. It doesn't mean that it's definitely not true,
You know what it
but
is?
it's certainly evidence that it might be true.
It probably means that it's just dark evidence.
All right, I'm back, boys.
Yeah.
But
Well,
they
congrats.
find the evidence. Sorry.
Well, I used this example. I said to them earlier, like, because I don't even necessarily ascribe to a dome. I think it's a reasonable logical conclusion, but I'm not going to ever say that I know that there's a dome, right? But if I was to say to them, right, okay, I know the Earth's flat, and there must be a dome, and my lack of evidence, evidence of absence isn't absence of evidence. Sorry, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. So, therefore the dome's possible, right? So go suck it. Right? Does that make any sense? Like, they wouldn't accept that, so why should we?
Exactly. I mean, well, unicorns exist, and there's a absence of evidence isn't evidence of evidence of absence. So therefore,
Right.
unicorns must exist. Everything must exist.
Well, they might say that unicorns.
There's nothing that doesn't exist outside of that mindset. Like, it's outrageous. It's basically like totally postmodern nonsense.
Cool. Well, that'll do it for the interferometry presentation. I think everyone. Thanks everyone for coming. We'll be back tomorrow with another presentation from Patricia.
To the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, it's part of the show. Didn't they teach you to reach for the stars while opening up the bars and keeping you chained down with mortgage bills and cars? Vaccines for your arms, kids sounding like supercharged, caffeinated hate-filled scars and rage-quit repertoires. No answers for yards, caught up in emotion that's not even yours. Imposter truths like impeccable retards, lined up for your serving of gish gallop and wars. No remedy can save the lost, in love with the yarn. I'm tired of walking into refracted shards, poor science displayed by disgusting bards. Soaked in sin with your dupe is delight and a new hand of cards. Been so long, seems like for love I'm just too hard, I'm just too hard. I said, welcome to the show, where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know. Intoxicated 8 makes you believe you're spinning in space while you have no shame or grace. It's a disdainful state I used to contemplate, how to save myself from my own self-hate. Wonder why I was even made with a dreadful fate, forced to try and awake with a full plate, no one to help me stay awake or educate. I've had to liberate and fight through hidden gates, but my brother, heaven could never be late, and rockets don't work in space. It's all fake, the show is on Mars, it's a joke, but you're too far gone, it won't be long. Fepe's beak is strong. We have our song and we march along like streams of knowledge leading to God's holy pond, and lives of truth that hits the bong and sings the song, turns mankind from the wrong. We come in peace with a holy gown and all of us wearing our holy crowns. So the earth is flat and we probably just won't get along, just to go along. I said, welcome to the show, where you don't know if it's part of the show.